systems. And it's essentially the software that a lot of environmentalists use to aggregate data to ensure if there are specific geographic regions that are more ideal for certain projects and initiatives. For example, if we ever wanted to add like a zero waste location somewhere in San Francisco Bay Area, you would use geographic information systems to lay out all the important data sets that you need to conclude what is the best location for that area. So are there any schools nearby? Is the land flat? What does the topography features look like? And within that software, you can also run Python scripts to automate a lot of those executions. And that is how I fell in love with software engineering, was that first glimpse that you can really utilize software for making good and impacting the world to be a better place. So after that, I kind of switched my focus. I was focusing on doing environmental law. And then after that class, I switched on to major in computer science.
That's amazing. So did you face any obstacles when you were doing that, when you're pursuing a career in STEM?
Yes, definitely. Just because I never really had exposure to programming. I played a lot of video games growing up and kind of dabbled with some HTML programming during the MySpace days. But I didn't really have I didn't have a formal education when it came to computer science. My high school didn't offer computer science as a class. And so I really dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome as I was taking those classes. I've experienced a lot of judgment from other people as well, like other students that had prior knowledge to computer science. No one wanted to kind of partner up with me in projects because I was new. And that really kind of took a toll on my pride and my confidence. But the really great thing about computer science is that as you keep exposing yourself in all these frameworks and the fundamentals of what you're learning, your brain starts to adapt and to really kind of just like be able to see these problem skills, and you're able to solve them. It's kind of like math, right? Like we all don't know how to multiply in the beginning, and then towards like after third grade, you kind of know how to do your multiplication tables. So it's pretty similar to programming. You just have to keep trying, you have to keep practicing, and just being curious to learn more and to expand your horizon.
So you mentioned that like a lot of people said like they didn't want to partner up with you in projects and things like that. So
Yeah.
how did you move past that?
Um, to be honest, I kind of just ignored it. The great thing about computer science is that, yes, you can have teammates to help with you and support you, but there's so many supportive people within the space. So I found a really strong community in Women in Tech at Berkeley, where I kind of just like told them my story and how I was new. And there was a lot of really great supportive people and mentors that kind of helped me in that regard. And the TAs in Berkeley were also very helpful. So they kind of saw that this wasn't just a problem within me, it was a problem that was happening within the class. So they kind of just paired them randomly, and like you couldn't really say otherwise and judge people based on their prior education, which I thought was really helpful. And that's the way to really make computer science inclusive, is that you're not allowing other people dictate just because I'm new doesn't mean that I can't ever learn. And there's areas in the education system that could really help pave that so that people feel more included and feel more supported.
That's really great. I'm glad you're able to move past that. As a software engineer, what is something that you love the most about your job?
Um, there is a really interesting stereotype about computer scientists or programmers, and that is you just program the whole day and you're not seeing people. And that's completely false, because my day-to-day job consists of seeing people consistently, making sure that what I'm building is alignment with various stakeholders. So there's a lot of different people involved in creating a feature or creating a new product, there is a UX designer. So you, as a software engineer, you have to go into the UX designer to kind of figure out if this is the right layout and design that we want to build. There is the product manager who kind of dictates and drives the product vision of the product. So you have to make sure that you have to converse with them to make sure that you're in alignment with what you're building. And then there's also your whole team, because in software development, you're not just building something by yourself, you're building it with so many other people, and you need to ensure that your code that you're building is in alignment with the quality coding standards, and your other team also approves of what you are submitting within the ultimate core coding tech stack. So it's really incredibly dynamic. You talk to a lot of people, and just kind of like a ballpark of how I spend my day. I probably spend around 2 hours programming, and the rest of that day during my workday is comprised of talking to many stakeholders before I even code, which I really love.
So there's a lot of communication that comes with programming. So it's not just that stereotype. So how do you get past the bad days at work or like find, I guess, fulfillment with what you do?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say one of the bad days is when you're trying to code something and nothing works and you can't seem to figure it out. The biggest way that I've tried to surpass that is just having the confidence that although I don't know how to solve this problem now, I have the ability to talk to other people so that I can get to where I need to go. So typically what happens is you're stuck and there's a huge bug. You kind of don't know how to figure it out on your own. I just kind of calm down and just basically talk to other people and see if they've had a similar situation with their code, and then eventually you figure it out. So it's just having the confidence of the unknown, even though you don't know how to do something in this very moment, having the confidence that you can figure it out and you can find the right person to give you the right clarity, give you the right answer, is really, really important when it comes to being a leader in software engineer, because you're not meant to just do it all on your own. You're meant to talk to other people and communicate and learn along the way.
So that collaboration really comes in handy a lot every day, right?
Exactly.
So, as a woman in STEM and software engineering, considering all those obstacles you face, do you have any advice for other young women who are interested in pursuing similar careers?
My advice is to align your current interests with software development, because software development has so many different intersectionals. And what I mean with that is that you can really play around with your passions and integrate software development, because it's everywhere. We all have our phones, we all are experiencing technology, and it's just important to kind of see how to tap into what your passions are and see how you can improve that with technology in mind. And just kind of jumping into fashion, for example, there's so many different facets of fashion that require technology. There's the e-commerce aspect, which I work in, and there's so many different problems that we need to solve for buyers who are buying products online and are expected to get their products within 2 days, such as in Amazon, and making sure that that whole process is streamlined for them in an optimized and efficient manner. That's one sector, fashion. There's also so many different areas. If you're interested in video gaming, if you're interested in sports, if you're interested in books, there's just so many different ways you can integrate technology in your day-to-day life and to everyone else's day-to-day life.
Yeah, so getting into fashion, how has that like impacted your career and how has it like changed your goals?
I've always been very much a passionate person when it comes to fashion, because I think it's the ultimate form of self-expression. It's the way I love to express myself. I love playing out with different styles. And how I came about it was that I got into the e-commerce space. So in addition to being a software developer and an engineering manager, I'm also doing my own online business. And so I was able to integrate all the things that I know within my job and with my side business. The biggest thing for me about fashion is that when I was in a really low state in computer science, the only thing that really made me excited was fashion, and basically kind of thinking of my outfits for the day and making sure that I looked good when I went to my lectures in college, that I looked good and confident when I was talking to meetings at work. So it really encouraged me and motivated me to kind of get out of that negative mindset of like, oh, I can't do it. Oh, I'm too young, or oh, I don't know anything because I'm new to this space. And when I put on like my favorite red dress or my favorite, pantsuit, I just feel really, really confident. And so that's kind of how I utilize fashion when it came to my struggles with imposter syndrome. And I also utilized it to create a software development career, engineering career for myself that just utilizes all the different things that I love, fashion and technology.
So when did you start getting in, feeling passionate about fashion? Was it like from a young age, or did it start happening later on?
Yeah, I've always just loved fashion. In high school, I was voted best dressed, and now at work, I'm kind of noted as like one of the best dressed. But I really just loved the creative aspect of it. It's just so really inspiring to see different ways that you can express yourself through the clothes that you wear and see the transformation of feeling really confident. So I would say like at the age of 5, I was already really interested in fashion. I remember wearing high heels, like my Barbie high heels, while I was riding my bike. And my mom just kind of like giving me her tips about how to dress and trying out her shoes, even though they were super big. And then when I moved to United States, I felt like that was my form of self-expression. I moved from the Philippines to United States, and I really felt like that was a way for me to really understand the culture, the pop culture. So I integrated a lot of the media inspirations that I got from my favorite TV shows into how I dressed and how I wanted to express myself, and how I wanted people to kind of see who I was and my identity.
Wow. So you mentioned that you struggle with imposter syndrome. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is the concept of feeling like you are not worthy and you are not enough because you have a feeling of being an imposter. So like it's very common for women in technology to experience imposter syndrome because there is a lack of women representation, and therefore they feel like they don't belong and they feel like they're constantly an imposter because they don't have these leaders that they can look up to and say, hey, she did it, so can I. So there's a lack of representation, a lack of diversity that can cause imposter syndrome. And it's not just women, it can also vast in your culture and your ethnicity. Um, so yeah, imposter syndrome, I feel like everyone gets it, but I feel like it is more common when you're put into a situation where you are unique and you are one of very few people in that industry. So in engineering, that's definitely the case for women.
So you said that like fashion helps you build that the leadership skills and confidence to help you move past that. Were there other things that also helped you move along, like and build leadership?
That's a good question. I would say the biggest thing is finding your support system. So in any industry, you're bound to find amazing, inspirational women that can help you get rid of that imposter syndrome mentality. And so for me, for example, when I was in college, I really tried to find that community. And so I found a lot of women in tech that were also experiencing the same thing. At work, we also have a really great supportive women in tech group that I'm very much active as to help other women. And it's also, I feel like, being transparent. I feel like some people don't want to say that they feel not confident or they feel insecure. and they try to pretend that they're not. And I think it's a domino effect. When we try to pretend and not be transparent and vulnerable in our spaces and in our community, it creates this perpetual cycle of imposter syndrome everywhere else. So the biggest way I've done it is just showing up as me, showing up as my unique self. I don't try to act like a man when I go and write my emails. I make sure that it's my voice and it's my identity. I don't try to act as if the person that's writing it is a white male. And the way I dress, some people, love wearing those sweatpants and sweatshirts in the technology space, but I love to wear really nice, vibrant colors, vibrant dresses, and really expressing my unique self and my authentic self at work. And that has really helped with imposter syndrome, is just being confident and knowing that when you're confident, everything else kind of just works in your advantage.
Wow. So how did all those experiences like with STEM, with imposter syndrome, all those highs and lows, how did that lead you to sharing your story on social media?
It really started during the pandemic. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to see people in person, and I found that the digital space, Instagram, was a really great way to connect with other women, to connect with other content creators who are also women in technology. And so, starting out in last February, when we were kind of on lockdown, I was a little bit bored. I didn't have a lot of friends who were around the area, and FaceTime, you can only FaceTime with people so much. And so I really utilized the time at home to learn how to make really fun reels, to create a really great vision for my Instagram, and to tell my story, because I felt like there were so many other people who could resonate and felt the same way in the industry.
I mean, I think that's really inspiring story, how you like overcame those and wanted to encourage others to help them also feel like a sense of belonging. What are some powerful things on social media that have helped you spread your message?
The most powerful thing, that's a good question. I feel like there is an awakening in social media. It's no longer a superficial area, or it could be, but I see a transformation where there is a lot of social media, um, famous content creators, whether they're famous or not, but there's just a huge community where their ultimate goal is to help people feel better about themselves, to help people feel more confident. And that transformation has really paved the way for me to also be part of the conversation of, like, it's not all nice butterflies and and nice fantasy, like the fantasy that people like to put on their Instagram, like their famous self, their favorite version of themselves, and they're not showing us their vulnerabilities and their struggles. And I see such a huge transformation in that now, and it's just really exciting to see. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I love just going and reaching out with people on social media.
That's awesome. So, um, with imposter syndrome, what led you to encourage others to just embrace that kind of self love?
Yeah. It's really about your personal journey. Like, I feel like when we are vulnerable and we tell our story, it helps other people kind of see you as like, hey, she was able to figure it out. She was able to tackle all those obstacles. I can too. And I'm kind of going around on that question, but I think yeah, I think it's about just being able to express yourself in the way that you want others to see you, in a genuine and authentic way.
So, how is like that like self reflection over time impacted your life, your goals?
Oh yeah, it's definitely been a huge aspect of um, just my transformation as my, yeah, in terms of how I've become who I am now. It's definitely because of that self reflection and self love. And it's taken a lot of years and a lot of introspection to figure out, okay, when I'm thinking this way, it's probably because I'm triggered in a certain way, whether it be from a previous work experience or a school experience. And that shouldn't stop me from doing what I want to do, or for seeing that I actually have something to offer. Um, so it really, I think that type of introspection and reflection can be so significant in everyone's lives, because then you can combat whatever your mind is telling you, such as if you have a fear of starting your Instagram because you're scared that people will make fun of your reels, like your friends, or you're scared of starting software development because you're going to be one of very few women. When you have those thoughts in your mind, you can kind of switch back and say, like, hey, like, I noticed this, I accept it. And that doesn't have to be my reality. It's my thoughts. And I have a choice in terms of whether or not I want to act on that thought, or if I want to combat it and still do it, regardless of whether or not I'm scared or I'm intimidated. And so, yeah, it's a very significant aspect of how I am now and where I am because of reflection.
So when you were like navigating all the, I guess, like adversity you faced when you were starting pursuing like STEM early on, was there any point where you felt like you wanted to give up or quit?
Oh, yes, definitely a lot of times. The biggest time that this occurred was when I failed my first computer science class, because it was just such a huge difference to how I experienced learning, and everything was so fast. So I failed my first introduction to computer science class. And that really took a toll on my pride and my confidence. And I felt really insecure of whether or not I could do it. Um, and the great thing about it is that I didn't stop. I didn't quit. Even though I thought about it, I told myself that I can't expect myself to really learn everything that other people have learned in high school. And it's okay to fail. It doesn't mean that I'm unworthy. It doesn't mean that I'm stupid. It just meant that my brain literally had a difficult time trying to absorb the information because there was just so much. So I re-enrolled in the course. I told myself that I'm going to try again. There's no harm in it. And I got an A in that course the second time around. And the really great thing about it is that I had that prior knowledge that I could transfer once I took the class again. So I felt more comfortable and more familiar with the concepts and the lesson plan. And now I actually mentor the same class, or I help mentor people in that same class, because I remembered the struggle of just kind of understanding the frameworks and the fundamentals of computer science. It's really, really difficult if you've never done it before. So my advice always is, if you fail, it doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you can never get there. It just means that you have some more, you need to take more time to understand things. You need to give your brain some space to adapt. And ultimately, it's just having the right mindset that you can do it. It's just going to take other people a couple more time studying, and other people might get it right away, but it doesn't mean that you're never going to get there. And the biggest inspiration for that is the growth mindset. It's one of my favorite concepts in learning, is that you have the ability to change your brain. You have the ability to create a learning space that really works well for you. And it's so unique to everyone else. And you don't necessarily need to be talented or natural at doing something. Like, you don't have to be natural at being great at problem solving. You don't have to be natural at being great at math. You just have to have the curiosity and the passion to learn, and you'll eventually get there. And at many cases, those people who are more curious and more passionate end up doing better than the people who are quote unquote natural at doing things.
Yeah, so at young ages when people first hear the word like programming or computer science, they think you need like a degree or something to go into it, and they feel like discouraged to pursue it. So what would you tell people who feel intimidated by that kind of mindset?
Yeah, I would say it's valid to feel that way just because within the media and with the amount of exposure that younger women may not have with programming, it's valid that you feel that way. So acknowledging that it's a normal thing is the first step. The second step is to have this mindset that you don't necessarily need to have someone you're inspired of to be in that current state that you want to be in. And what I mean by that is that you can become that person for yourself. Like you can be that person that you want yourself to be inspired of. So if you don't see yourself, for example, in women in tech, like you want to be a NASA astronaut, but you don't see yourself in that type of leadership role because there's not a lot of people in there, you can make yourself be that inspiration for yourself. And it kind of goes back to the notion of like, who are you inspired? And I think we need to stop thinking about other people to inspire us, but have ourselves lead that way and inspire ourselves. And I think I see that in many leaders who are women who did not have that inspire, like the person that inspired them. They just became their own person and they did it. So I would say that's one is accepting that it is valid to feel that way. Second is to be your own inspiration. And then third is to just be curious. Like, as I mentioned, technology is everywhere. You don't have to like video games. You don't have to like hackathons. Like, if you like a certain thing in your life, think about how that could surface up in technology. And you don't have to be a programmer. If you don't like coding, you can do other things within the technology space that you really love to do, such as UX design. If you really love creating designs and seeing how something could look like, you could go to UX design or UI design. If you like being more part of like the product development, you could be a product manager. So there's so many different areas of technology that you can be a part of. It's not just software development. There's so many other areas. And if you're intimidated by coding, I would say that there's so many resources out there now that really try to just make the concepts even simpler. So Code Academy is a really great resource, and just seeking out support and help because there are so few women, and it's just important to kind of see like how their experience and their journey has gone.
Yeah, so you've talked about how fashion like kept you going during the tough times. So have you been able to like combine your passions for fashion and also like software engineering as a job like and do
Yeah, yeah. I would say at a day-to-day basis, I love just to wear what the outfits that I want to see myself wearing throughout the week. So I love just planning out my outfits before I go to work. And even during the pandemic, I still love to kind of play around with my style. But then in terms of my career, I have actually incorporated it so that I can be more of an expert at a specific industry and technology, and that is e-commerce. So for the past 4 years, I've been really kind of in the deep roots of understanding what e-commerce is. I've built features where I've really dealt with trying to figure out how to make online buyers have a more seamless, friendly experience when they're buying things online. And there's so many facets to that. There is search, for example, everyone has to search for that product before they buy it. So how is that experience going to look like for people? And what type of machine learning algorithms or recommendations can we provide them so that they can have a better decision before they buy something. There's also the checkout phase. People don't really kind of see the complexity of that, but there's so many there's so many flows as to how someone can check out. So you buy something on Amazon, you add it to your cart, and then you check out. But what about if they have a discount? What about if they kind of waited for a while for 10 minutes and now their information is lost? How's that experience going to be? Are they going to have to refresh the page, or are you going to save the page so that they still have that information when they refresh? What about if they didn't log in, their guest user? Like, how is that going to look like? And they don't want to provide you their, they don't want to create a logged in user. So there's so many facets to how checkouts could be and how that could be an area of improvement for a lot of e-commerce brands. Um, and so I've really integrated my passion for fashion and retail into that sector because I love buying, I love shopping, especially online now that we're in the pandemic, and just thinking about how, as a user, would I like to see my experience? Like, I want to be able to check out as fast as possible, because if you let me wait 5 minutes, I probably will just skip that whole process and find another brand or another retail brand that can check out me as faster than this other brand. So there's so many areas in the e-commerce space where I'm able to utilize my love for fashion and shopping and that overall experience. So that was another advice of mine, is just to really find ways that you can integrate your passions with technology, because there's so many of them
Yeah.
surfacing up.
There's definitely a lot of facets to technology. I feel like people have like this one directional mindset where they think it's just coding and like they can't do things like art besides or fashion like what you do. So, I mean, for people who have that mindset, what would you tell them?
I would tell them first, like as you mentioned, it's such a multi-dimensional industry. It's not just nerds who are trying to, code something or hack something, and create this like weird stereotype that it's only for people who love math, it's only for people who are kind of nerdy and don't really fit that identity of being the sweatpants sweatshirt type of person, to go to work. So my biggest thing is really to just identify your passions and see how you can integrate that with technology.
All right. Well, I think those are all the questions I have for you. So I'm going to move to the Q&A in the chat right now. So one of the questions is, did you use any of your environmental classes to help you with your software engineering career?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I think a lot of people who are researchers or who have a background in science, they know the scientific method really well. And with that framework in mind, it really comes handy in my day-to-day software engineering life, because when you have a hypothesis in software engineering, you have to validate it before you actually build something. And with I found that my scientific background has really made me see in that different way, as opposed to others who had just a computer science background their whole college experience. I'm able to kind of see it as a research process, right? Like, you have a theory about something, you have a hypothesis, and then you kind of create experimentations to see if it actually leads to that conclusion. And if it doesn't, then what happened and how were you able to validate it if it was. And so that whole workflow, I feel like as a scientist, has really helped me be better at my job. Another aspect of it, environmentalist, is sustainability, and how does that impact how does technology impact sustainability? And there's so many areas where you can also play around with that. For example, all the data that we store in the cloud are stored in data centers, and data centers can be extremely wasteful and extremely they use a lot of power, because a data center includes a lot of CPUs running constantly. And then how do you run all that? And the abstraction of it is that we don't know where these things are, because when we store something in the cloud, we just don't see the impact of it in the environment and the impact that it can have in other people's environments. So I would say I've been very thoughtful about that. Like, when I'm building something and it takes a lot of power or it takes a lot of cloud storage, does it really need to? Like that question of like, do we need to really scale in this regard if there's not a lot of use? Because we're still going to have to take up this much space, even though it's not going to be useful. So that I would say that is kind of like an indirect area that I've seen my environment experience translate to my day-to-day job as a software engineer.
So were there other areas in science that were interested you as a when you were getting involved in software engineering?
Yeah, environmental science for sure, which is why I was there for 3 years. And there's also so many aspects of environmentalism too. There you can be more into food science, so food justice and how that incorporates in people's day-to-day lives. You can also do clean energy, clean alternative energy, solar power, wind power, like how does that all integrate into other people's lives? But other than that, I would say psychology was also really interesting, just the study of the mind and the brain. And with my passion for like the growth mindset, for example, there's so many things that we don't know about the brain and how it can adapt so well. Like why does an infant or a toddler why is it so much easier for them to speak 3 different languages as opposed to someone who is now trying to speak 3 different languages at 20 years old or at 30 years old. And that's because there's so much neuroplasticity in their brain to allow that change. And that's also really exciting to kind of see how the brain works and integrating it with technology as well, because there's certain facets of the brain that we can probably algorithmically make. And that's why machine learning is a space. It's basically mimicking how the brain works and how the brain adapts to certain situations. And that's why we have, you know, these machine learning algorithms that can take a certain piece of data and then translate it to a different sectors because of how you're because it's mimicking like changes into the brain and changes into the how data is processed.
That's super fascinating. Wow. So what do you code as a software engineer, and what project are you currently working on that you're excited about?
Um, I code in Java mainly, so it's an object-oriented programming language. I would say it's one of the easiest ways to start out because it's very user-friendly in terms of readability. And it just feels like you're reading a book. Like there's some programming languages like SQL, which are harder to read. And so I really recommend something like Python or Java. What was the other question? Oh, projects that I'm currently.
Yeah.
So my project now is, as I mentioned before, a little bit, is kind of figuring out how the checkout process works for for Salesforce. So I work at Salesforce, and basically what that means is for every customer, we want to make sure that the checkout process works as seamless as possible. And right now, my team primarily works on scalability and performance. So for example, Bed Bath and Beyond has candle day sales every year, and they estimate about 12,000 to 20,000 orders per minute. And no one really thinks about how that looks like in the back end. Like, how are you able to process that many orders in such few time frame? And so your code needs to be able to scale in that regard. And so that's what my team kind of focuses on, is when we have these big retail stores, Target, Burberry, Bed Bath and Body Works, we need to be able to help them scale in however capacity that they need. And it's not just, creating a project and it runs properly, successfully. We also need to be able to see if it runs in an optimized way.
All right. And the last question I see in the chat right now is, do you have any tips to be sustainable with technology?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say the first thing that you can do is to be mindful about how much cloud space that you're storing, because for everything that you store in the cloud, it's being stored in a data center, and a data center requires a lot of power to run things on. And there's certain drawbacks in that. For example, data centers require a lot of heat, and that heat needs to be released somewhere, and usually it's released in water in ecosystems that don't have the capacity to be that hot. And so when you dump water in areas like ocean, like certain lakes or oceans, it can really disrupt the ecosystem of where of fishes and plants that don't have that adaptability to experience that much heat. That's one example of why data centers are really not great for the environment when we abuse it. So just being mindful about what you're storing in the cloud. If you don't need that many photos, delete them. If like we have that whole notion of like sometimes we open our phones and we have a bunch of snapshots of our face like looking really oddly, like just delete those. Those don't need to go to the cloud. And yeah, be mindful about your consumption of technology, because even just like a phone on its own can require a lot of waste. And if you're utilizing it, that's great. But if you have other areas of technology that you don't use that often, a mindset of minimalism is great for just saving the environment and making sure that the resources that you have in your home is actually something that you're utilizing on a day-to-day basis. And if not, then perhaps you didn't really need it in the beginning.
Wow. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Zara. I think those are all the questions we have in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and ask, does anyone else have any other questions? None? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Suhani.
Great. Thank you so much, Zoya and Zara. I thought that was really well, and I personally really enjoyed listening to it. Right now, I am putting a Google form in the chat, so participants, you can go ahead and fill that out to mark your attendance and eligibility for prizes. And for anyone who might have any other questions for Zara, we will be contacting her for any social media and contact links, so that we will send that directly to you and you can ask her any of your questions. So just to wrap this up, we would like to take a group photo. So if you're comfortable with turning on your video, you can do that. And
Wait, I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
What's like your favorite thing that you've done out of all the things? Like, I don't know if that's specific enough, but yeah.
Well, that's a really good question, Trinity. I would say my favorite thing is meeting people and helping them kind of get into their careers in women in tech. So I love mentoring students who are interested in programming and just kind of seeing them and their passions, how that gets integrated into the programming experience that they have. So one of the things that I really loved volunteering for is this organization called Technovation. And it basically helps young students, young high school students to learn how to program in a very simple way, because it's not introducing programming language just yet. It's basically a drag and drop, and they get to create really fun apps with just that type of modeling strategy. And so, yeah, mentoring, I would say, is my favorite thing. It sounds cliche, but it's true. I think there's so many things that young generations have to offer in the industry, and just seeing how they are curious and passionate about, about technology is just really exciting to me, because they will be the next leaders after I've retired.
That's cool.
I actually have a question to add on top of that, but do you have a particular project that you've worked on in programming that's been your favorite?
That's a good question. I would say right now the project that I'm doing to make sure that checkout processes for all our retail brands are as effective as possible has been the most challenging and the most rewarding, because if you think about it, the checkout process is probably one of the most important areas when it comes to the buyer experience online. And yeah, there's just so many areas that we have been able to focus on to make sure that everyone is able to check out and they're able to pay and they're able to get their products on time. But other than that, like in school, my favorite one was I created this game, this Pac-Man game that basically optimized where he can get the dot at the fastest time using machine learning. So you basically feed the algorithm all these different maze options for Pac-Man to go through, and then it dumps in the most optimized way to get the dot at the most seamless fashion. So that was really exciting, and like you were able to create like this really cute design, and we added sound to it, so it was kind of cute.
I love that. All right, so we can go ahead and turn on your videos if you're comfortable, and I'll go ahead and take a photo. I'll give you
I'm gonna take a photo
seconds.
too.
3, 2, 1. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Yes, did you have a question?
All right, let me ask her again because I asked her, she asked what time is the thing, and I said, and 3, and then I said, are you coming over after? And she said, yeah, okay. And she said,
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Our next workshop will happen at 4 p.m., so we have an hour and a half till then. And have a great day.
Thank you, Zara, for opening up.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.